Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy, and I'll be the Take Charge Cat leading your first Tuesday lesson. And today we're going to be talking about a really fun topic, which is earning money, and specifically how to score a job that will produce this money for you. So here's the layout of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to start out talking about resumes, how to create one, what they're useful for, moving on to cover letters, and interview tips and tricks, and we'll conclude the session with a small take-home exercise. And you might be wondering, why do I need to know all this stuff? Why is a resume important? Cover letter? And it's pretty simple because in order to get those high paying competitive jobs, most of the time they're going to require a cover letter, a resume, and an interview. And it's important to have all these things ready to go because sometimes an opportunity just comes up and you don't want to miss it. And they're going to ask you, send us a resume by noon today. It's going to be really hard to just whip up a resume short notice. You maybe will miss things. Stuff might not be the way that you want to present yourself. So having all of this prepared ahead of time will be really helpful once you start looking for jobs. So before we dive into resumes, cover letters, and all that, I want to talk about first impressions. Now, you might have heard about these and how important they are when you're talking about, your peers or classmates or family members. And when you're applying for a job, it's the same. You have a very small first impression window, right? Maybe you know that you are hardworking and you're really dedicated and you're passionate about this job, but the employer doesn't know that about you. All they see is your resume, your cover letter, and then if they like that, they'll move on to the interview process where you'll get another chance to talk about yourself and show them who you are. But the difficult part is we want to make sure that that first impression and what we put in our resume and our cover letter really conveys who we are. And it's outside of just these two things too. So when you go to the location, maybe to pick up or drop off your application, dress nice. Even though you're only going to be there for maybe a minute or two, and maybe you might not even be talking to the person that's going to hire you, it's just a good way to make a first impression. And you also want to be prepared. So whether that's showing up early, bringing your resume with you to the interview, being courteous, thinking of how can you be thoughtful in this process, that's going to go a long way. Another key point is having professionalism. And this is difficult, right? We talk to our friends more casually. Hey, what's up, bro? But we're not going to talk to our employer that way. We're not going to talk to colleagues that way because we want to show that we are professional and get that first impression right on the right foot, right out the door. Another thing, and this is super important, is we want to make sure that our attention to detail is spot on for this process. So that means in your resume, double check, triple check, quadruple check, have a friend or family member check that there's no spelling errors, grammatical errors. Same with your emails. Make sure that you're spelling words out in full. There's no, typos, because that goes a long way, right? If I look at two resumes and they both look great, but one has a bunch of spelling errors in it, I'm probably going to put it in the no pile. And I know a lot of employers who think that way, right? They're like, well, if they don't have attention to detail in this application process, they're not going to have attention to detail in the job itself. So just a few key points, something to be cautious of while you're doing your application process. So moving on to resumes. Resumes are a one-page document, and it's very cut and dry, this bullet point list of, your skills, your experience, your education. So for education, you might put on when do you plan on graduating? What's your GPA? What school are you going to? With experience, this doesn't have to be work experience, right? I know myself and all of you may not have a ton of this. That's totally okay. You can just talk about clubs that you're in. You can talk about sports that you're pursuing, volunteering that you've done, any extracurriculars. Do you play an instrument? Are you passionate about art? All of that goes a long way because employers can see if you're going to be a hardworking team member or are you a leader in your classes. And that's important because those skills translate to the work environment as well. They should also be professional, accurate, and once again, have no spelling errors. So make sure, you're spelling out your name in full. You're not putting a nickname on there. When you put like your contact information, make sure you don't have a silly email address that's like I heart Justin Bieber at gmail.com, right? Shouldn't look like that. And also accurate. If you kind of fib on your resume and you say something like, I'm proficient in Spanish, when maybe you've taken like one Spanish class, that's not going to be good, right? They're going to find out, maybe even in the interview, they're going to ask you, that's great that you speak Spanish. That'll be really helpful to us. Can you talk about yourself in Spanish? And all of a sudden you are like, uh-oh, they're going to see that. And that dishonesty is going to be really not great. That's not a good first impression, right? So just keep all this in mind. And this is an example of a resume right here. So we have, this is a professional baseball player. They start out with a little summary about themselves. You can do this. All resumes tend to look different from each one to another. So you can look at a few while you're creating yours. But they've listed some skills that they have, and these can be tangible or intangible. So it could be things like adaptable, goal-oriented, or it could be like, I know how to use Microsoft Excel, or if you do actually speak another language, you could put that on there. Then we go on to work history. So you talk about where you worked and for how long you worked there. Specifically, what tasks did you do? How are you a part of that team? Listing education, and then also accomplishments. This is cool. So if you've won any awards or championships in sports, or awards in art or music or whatever, academic awards too, you can list those there. It just shows that you're dedicated and might be attractive to an employer. So let's take a second to think about this resume and pretend that you're the employer. What sticks out to you on here? What to you looks like, wow, I definitely like that this person has this quality or listed this on their resume. Or also what sticks out to you is maybe a red flag, what could be not good, so just consider that. It's always good when you're even reviewing your own resume to think about how an employer would view it. All right, and then next, let's brainstorm some skills or involvements that you could list on your own resume. And we're going to come back to this in a bit, but just be thinking about that as we continue through this presentation. All right, next we have cover letters. What is a cover letter? It's another one-page document about yourself, but it's different. So this time it's not going to be so cut and dry. It's not bullet points. This cover letter gives you the opportunity to really tell a story about yourself. And you could talk about why you think you'd be a good asset to the company, why you're interested in that company particularly, how do their missions and values align with your own, and just sort of sell yourself, right? Talk about why you would be a good fit. The difference between a cover letter, one main difference, there's a few, is that with a resume, you can for the most part send a replica of your resume to a bunch of different places. It doesn't have to be tailored. Cover letters need to be specifically tailored for the position you're applying for and that company. It's going to be obvious to an employer if it looks like just a generic cover letter. They didn't put any special effort into like that one specific position. And it's also just going to go a long way, right? If you relate to the company and you relate to that position, talk about why you're specifically passionate about that company or that role, that's going to mean a lot to the employer. They're going to be pleased by that, right? Another thing to be careful of is not to repeat all of the same information from your resume on your cover letter. They can already see all that stuff. Maybe talk more about how those positions impacted you or how they shaped who you are today. Talk about the values of that company, why you're interested in it, maybe some kind of story about yourself. That is going to be what they're looking for on a cover letter. You can get creative, make it personal. So the next step, if an employer reviews your cover letter, reviews your resume, that's sort of the application package, and they like what they see, they want to continue to talk to you, then they're most likely going to set up an interview. And I know that for me, when I was applying for my first job and second job and third job, interviews were scary. I was like, my cover letter, I could take the time to write out carefully what I wanted, but an interview can be a little nerve wracking, right? You don't know exactly what questions they're going to ask, you don't know the right way to respond. But we're going to talk about some tips and tricks so you're not totally in the dark about that process, because I know it can be scary. So, there's some things I want to talk about that happen before an interview. And this isn't just like 5-10 minutes before. This is like get a good night's sleep before the day of the interview. Make sure you've eaten a good, healthy like breakfast or a meal before you go in so you're not hungry or distracted. Make sure you know where the location is. If you think that the interview is going to be, if it's in person, if you think that it's going to be like 10 minutes away, so you leave and then it's like 30 minutes away, that's not great, right? Showing up late is not going to make a good first impression for your interview. So that leads us to our next bullet: arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. Don't arrive like an hour early. I've seen some people do that and it's strange, it's weird, it's confusing. So 10 to 15 minutes is like a good time frame. Make sure you're dressed professionally. It doesn't have to be like, you kind of look at what the position is and then decide like how professionally you need to dress. But you can't really go wrong with like slacks and a nice button down shirt or something like that. Okay, and this one's really important. Turn your phone off. Like, don't have it around, don't have it out, don't even have it like in your lap or anything. It should just be totally away, because, and that goes for any other kinds of distractions, because this employer is taking time out of their day to interview you, and we want to make sure we're being respectful and we're appreciating their time. Okay, another couple points. Practice going over some interview questions with a friend or family member, or practice them with yourself in the mirror. It's really, that's like the best way that you can prepare for an interview, I would say, because there's plenty of questions online. There's going to be some ones that almost every interview is going to ask you, right? Tell us about yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? What makes you unique, right? And a lot of times these questions have very set specific ways that you can answer them. They have a structure so that when you're in the interview, you're not just like fumbling around for the answer. You kind of know, you've practiced it, you've rehearsed what you want to say, and you can really like present yourself well. Okay, another thing to do, this is really important. Make sure you've researched the company, you've researched the position, you know what they're about, you know what their values are, and have a couple questions prepared for them. Because at the end of every interview, the interviewer always says, okay, we've asked you all these questions. Do you have any questions for us? And it's nice to have questions for them, right? It shows that you're interested. It shows that you maybe have taken the time to research it. Maybe you pick out a key point that's on their website and you're like, oh, I'm really interested in this program. Can you tell me more about it? What do you do with this? Or you can ask, if you have questions, right? Like, what would a day in the life of somebody who works in this position look like? That's a great question to ask, right? If you're curious about it, ask it. It's better than just saying, nope, no questions, thanks, bye, right? Okay, during an interview, it's time to put all that preparation that you've done into action. So speak at a normal pace. Sometimes it's easy to speak really quickly if you're nervous, so just keep that in mind. Answer interview questions confidently. And it is totally okay to take a moment and, if they ask you a question and you're like, oh my gosh, I do not know how to answer this, it is more than okay to say, is it all right if I take a moment to think about that? And, take some time, gather the thoughts in your head. This is not only going to make your answer better because you've thought about it more carefully, but two, it shows the employer, oh, this applicant really wants to make sure that they're taking the interview seriously. They want to make sure that their answer is well thought out. They care about this interview, right? So totally okay to do that if you want to take a moment. And also keep up the professionalism, have good posture, dress nicely, be on time. We sort of talked about all this, but now is where you can really apply that professionalism, using the correct way to address whoever your interviewer is, and being polite. So that's what you should do during an interview. And then moving on to after the interview, this is the time where you can really solidify your great first impression. So first, thank the interviewer for their time at the end of the interview. That's, of course, you want to do that, right? But also follow up with a thank you email and just reaffirm your interest in that position. Do it, the next day or within that time frame. It just like reminds them, you're back in their mind, they're thinking about you again. And also it shows that you care. It's just courteous. You know, it's just a nice thing to do. And then also, if they say, you'll hear back from us beginning of next week, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday rolls around, don't be afraid to call them and ask, say, hey, I'm just curious, has this position been filled already? Sometimes I actually heard a story of one of my friends who was applying for a job, a full-time job after graduation. And I guess somehow they lost her contact information, but they wanted to hire her and they had no way to reach out to her. And luckily, she called a few days later and she said, hey, it's me. I'm just curious if the position's been fulfilled. And they were like, oh my gosh, yes, we were trying to figure out how to reach you. So had she not made that call, she wouldn't have gotten the job. So it's always good to just follow up, shows that you're interested too. All right. So that's all I have for you guys as far as interviews, resumes, cover letters go. I want to just leave you with this one quick reflection question to think about, which is what is it that you're learning in these workshops and in your other involvements in life that you could put on your resume? And if you want to take it a step further, maybe craft a little draft resume and start working on that stuff so you have it ready to go if the opportunity arises. So thank you guys so much, and we will see you again next week to talk about more topics.